When God is preparing to bless you, He rarely announces it with a trumpet or a spotlight. Instead, He often begins with a disruption, a shaking, a rearranging of what you thought was stable. It's the kind of divine interference that leaves you wondering why everything familiar suddenly feels uncertain. You pray for breakthrough, and instead your plans fall apart. You ask for clarity, and everything turns blurry. But in the spiritual dimension, this is often the first sign that God is moving. It's not chaos, it's construction. It's not punishment, it's preparation. The truth is, we human beings crave stability. We build comfort zones and cling to them as if they're permanent. Yet, comfort can be the most subtle form of stagnation. When everything feels predictable, growth slows down. Spiritually, that comfort can even become resistance to change. So when God wants to elevate you, He begins by disturbing your normal. He pushes you out of what feels safe so you can discover what's sacred. What you call disruption, heaven calls direction. Think of the moments in your life when everything seemed to unravel. Maybe a relationship ended, a career door closed, or a plan you worked so hard for suddenly collapsed. You probably felt abandoned, uncertain, maybe even betrayed by your circumstances. But when you look back later, you often realize that it was in those seasons of divine disruption that you found your truest strength. You prayed differently, you thought deeper, you became more resilient, more intentional, more aligned with your spiritual purpose. That's not coincidence, it's divine strategy. God never wastes discomfort. In fact, He uses it as the most efficient tool for transformation. When He's about to bless you, He will dismantle everything that cannot survive where you're going. That's why doors close, people leave, and comfort zones crumble. He's not taking things away to hurt you. He's taking them away to help you grow into someone who can sustain the blessing. There's a difference between receiving a blessing and being ready for it. A blessing given too early can destroy what it was meant to strengthen. So God prepares your capacity through discomfort. From a psychological point of view, disruption rewires the mind. Neuroscience tells us that when our routines are interrupted, our brains form new connections. That's exactly what happens spiritually too. When the old structures of your life fall apart, your faith forms new patterns of trust. You start depending on divine guidance more than personal logic. You begin to listen, not just think. You start to recognize that peace doesn't come from control, it comes from surrender. This is where the transformation begins. Philosophically, this pattern is ancient. Every great story of growth involves disruption. Abraham leaving his homeland, Moses facing exile before leadership, Joseph enduring betrayal before becoming a ruler. Each of them faced seasons where God rearranged everything familiar. But through those disruptions, they discovered divine direction. They learned that God's blessings are often hidden inside moments of breakdown. The blessing doesn't just come after the chaos, it's forged within it. And this isn't only a biblical truth, it's a psychological one. When we face uncertainty, our minds resist. We cling to what we know, but spiritually mature people learn to interpret disruption differently. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single shift in perception turns pain into purpose. You begin to realize that the situations you once saw as obstacles were actually divine signals, reminders that you were never meant to stay the same. If your life feels shaken right now, it might not mean that something is wrong. It might mean that something greater is being built. When God starts rearranging your comfort zone, it's not rejection, it's redirection. He's moving you out of what's predictable and into what's purposeful. Sometimes He removes what you think you need so you can discover what you're truly made of. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Growth always is, but that discomfort is holy. It's the tension between who you've been and who you're becoming. Every spiritual promotion requires a season of pruning. Every new chapter demands that something old be released. The sooner you accept that divine disruptions are part of the blessing process, the quicker you align with God's movement in your life. So, if you're in a place where things feel uncertain, where doors are closing, where people are walking away, where plans seem to crumble, don't panic. Pay attention. This might not be a setback, it might be the setup. Because when God is about to bless you, He first prepares the soil of your soul. He breaks what's no longer serving you to make room for what's meant for you. And when the dust settles, you'll realize that nothing was taken from you that was essential to your destiny. Every loss had purpose. Every disruption carried direction. Every unanswered prayer was God saying, "Trust me, I'm building something better." When God is preparing to bless you, there's often a quiet stirring that begins deep inside you. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle, almost imperceptible at first. You start feeling an inner restlessness, a sense that what once satisfied you no longer does. The things that used to excite you begin to lose their grip. Conversations that once entertained now feel shallow. You can't explain it, but something inside you is awakening, reaching for more. That's not boredom or burnout. That's a spiritual hunger being awakened by God Himself. This shift is one of the clearest signs that you're stepping into a season of divine blessing. Before God blesses you externally, He transforms you internally. He awakens a longing for something higher, purer, and more meaningful. Suddenly, your focus shifts from chasing success to seeking significance. You find yourself less interested in impressing others and more drawn toward living in alignment with truth. It's not that you've changed overnight. It's that your spirit is evolving to match the next level of your purpose. Psychologically, this process mirrors what we might call an identity transition. The mind and spirit are connected, and when your spiritual purpose expands, your old identity starts to outgrow its shell. You begin to feel a dissonance between who you've been and who you're becoming. It's uncomfortable because your external life hasn't caught up with your internal transformation yet. That tension is the gap between your current reality and your future calling, and it's sacred. In those moments, you may feel isolated. You'll notice that you're drawn to solitude more than usual. You'll crave moments of silence. Reflection and prayer, that's not you withdrawing. That's God calling you inward to tune your spirit to His frequency. The world grows loud, but God whispers, and to hear Him, you have to quiet the noise. This inner recalibration is essential because blessings require clarity. If your mind is cluttered and your heart is distracted, you won't recognize divine opportunities even when they're in front of you. This hunger for holiness isn't about moral perfection. It's about alignment. You begin to crave what is real, what is lasting, what connects you back to your Creator. The things of this world, validation, possessions, applause, start to lose their weight. You see through them. You start discerning that success without peace is just noise, And comfort without calling is emptiness in disguise. That's why God stirs your heart to seek Him. He's preparing you to handle what He's about to entrust to you. When your spirit is being refined, you might experience what feels like divine dissatisfaction. You'll feel the nudge to change habits, to walk away from environments that no longer align, or to break patterns that keep you small. These impulses are not random, they're spiritual invitations. God is upgrading your life, and upgrades require letting go of outdated software. If you ignore the inner pull, life will eventually push you. The discomfort will grow until change becomes inevitable. Philosophically, this mirrors an ancient truth. Before enlightenment, there must be emptiness. Before filling your cup with new wine, it must first be emptied of the old. God's blessings don't coexist with clutter. He doesn't pour fresh anointing into vessels still holding yesterday's residue. So when you begin to feel that spiritual hunger, don't suppress it. Feed it. Lean into prayer, into stillness, into the Word. Let God expand your inner world so that your outer world can rise to meet it. In the language of psychology, this is what we might call motivational dissonance. The old motivations, fear, validation, ego, lose power and new ones emerge. Truth, purpose, obedience. Your spirit starts demanding integrity. Your mind starts demanding growth. You can't no longer tolerate mediocrity, gossip, or small thinking. You want to live with intention. That is how you know you're shifting into divine readiness. And here's the irony. The closer you get to your blessing, the lonelier it may feel, because you're not just changing your habits, you're changing your frequency. People who once understood you might now misinterpret you. You're no longer driven by what drives them. But don't let that isolation scare you. Let it refine you. Every great spiritual awakening begins with separation before elevation. God calls you apart before He calls you forward. If you sense this hunger stirring in your heart, pay attention. That's God inviting you into intimacy, not just activity. He's saying, be still and know me. It's not about doing more. It's about becoming more aware. When you feed that hunger with prayer, study, and surrender, you begin to see the world differently. Your eyes sharpen. Your discernment deepens. You start recognizing blessings that others overlook because your spirit is tuned to divine frequency. So when you feel that divine restlessness, don't rush to fill it with noise or distraction. Let it lead you to your source. Because the hunger itself is holy, it's evidence that you're being prepared. God awakens desire before He delivers destiny. The emptiness you feel isn't a void. It's a signal that He's about to fill it with something extraordinary. When God is about to bless you, one of the clearest signs is that doors start opening. Doors you couldn't have forced open if you tried. Favor begins to follow you in ways that don't make logical sense. Opportunities align, conversations shift, and people appear in your life who play key roles in your next chapter. It's not coincidence, it's divine orchestration. When you walk in alignment with God's purpose, you start attracting what's meant for you, not chasing it. That's what divine favor looks like. Not striving, but flowing. But here's what makes this moment so profound. When favor starts showing up, it doesn't always look supernatural. It often hides in ordinary circumstances. A conversation that seems casual becomes the catalyst for a breakthrough. A random encounter opens the door to your calling. God moves through human hands and natural means, but His timing and precision are anything but ordinary. That's why awareness is critical. You have to be spiritually awake enough to recognize divine fingerprints on what the world calls luck. There's a psychological and spiritual rhythm to this. When your internal life becomes aligned, when your motives, your mindset, and your actions are consistent with your higher purpose, you become magnetic. You begin to move with clarity, and clarity attracts alignment. People sense it. They're drawn to your energy, your authenticity, your conviction. What's happening isn't manipulation, it's resonance. The frequency of your spirit begins to match the opportunities designed for your growth. God doesn't just drop blessings into chaos, He positions them where order exists. So when you discipline your heart, when you cultivate integrity and faithfulness, you create an environment where blessings can land and thrive. This is why favor feels effortless when it arrives. You don't have to chase or force outcomes. Things begin to unfold in your favor because you've already done the invisible work of preparation. You've aligned your thoughts and your habits with divine principles. From a psychological standpoint, that alignment rewires your perception. You start noticing doors that were always there but invisible before. Spiritually, those doors are activated by obedience. Every time you say yes to growth, God reveals another step. Every time you trust instead of panic, another path lights up. But divine favor doesn't mean there won't be resistance. In fact, sometimes the biggest open door will appear surrounded by challenges. That's where discernment matters. Not every open door is from God, and not every obstacle means stop. Sometimes the presence of opposition is proof that the door you're facing is significant. If it didn't matter, the enemy wouldn't bother guarding it. That's why it's so important to stay connected to God's voice. Favor without discernment can become distraction. But when you're anchored in His presence, you'll sense the difference between a test and a trap. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He was sold by his brothers, imprisoned unfairly, and forgotten by people he helped. Yet, in every place he found himself, favor followed him. Even in prison, he rose to influence. Why? Because God's favor isn't limited by circumstance. It's sustained by character. When God's hand is on you, no situation can hold you back. The system may try to delay you, but divine timing always overrides human control. Philosophically, this is the essence of grace in motion. Favor isn't something you earn, it's something you recognize and cooperate with. You align your behavior with the higher order of the universe. Faith, excellence, gratitude, humility, and the universe, guided by God, responds. Every act of integrity becomes an open invitation for divine opportunity. The blessings that come aren't random, they're relational. They flow from your connection to God and your consistency in walking His path. And here's the thing about favor. It's not always for you. Sometimes God blesses you to make you a channel of blessing for others. When opportunities come, when doors open, when resources flow, remember that you are part of a larger story. The favor on your life is designed to ripple outward. The moment you understand that, the blessings multiply. Gratitude expands what grace initiates. There's also a subtle shift that happens internally when you begin walking in favor. You stop begging and start believing. You no longer chase what's meant for you. You prepare for it. You walk into rooms differently, not from arrogance, but from assurance. You stop seeing yourself as someone waiting to be chosen and start realizing you're already called. That inner confidence becomes the space where favor continues to grow. When you reach that point, you begin to understand that favor isn't luck. It's the visible result of invisible alignment. God orchestrates connections, promotions, and ideas long before you see them. All he asks is that you stay ready mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Because when the blessing arrives, it doesn't pause to wait for your confidence to catch up. It requires you to step boldly into what you've been prepared for. So, when life starts shifting in your favor, when opportunities start aligning, when people begin recognizing your value, when things suddenly feel like they're clicking into place, don't question it. Don't shrink back in doubt. Stand tall in gratitude. You've prayed for this, worked for this, endured for this. Now, let yourself receive it with humility and confidence. Right before every major blessing, there's a battle. It's rarely visible, but you can feel it. The pressure increases, resistance intensifies, and life suddenly feels heavier. The timing almost seems unfair. You've prayed, you've stayed faithful, you've done everything right, and just when the breakthrough feels close, everything starts to shake. That's not coincidence. That's spiritual warfare. It's the tension that always precedes transformation. The enemy fights hardest when he senses your elevation is near, because he knows once you step into your blessing, his influence loses power. In these moments, it's easy to misinterpret the battle. You might assume that opposition means you've done something wrong, that maybe you've taken a wrong turn. But spiritually, resistance is often confirmation. If nothing were shifting, the enemy wouldn't bother attacking. Opposition is the echo of your progress. It's evidence that something in the unseen world is moving in your favor. When God is about to promote you, he doesn't just test your faith, he strengthens it through fire. Psychologically, this pattern mirrors the concept of resistance before growth. Anytime we're about to step into something greater, our nervous system resists change. It's how the human brain is wired, to protect, not to progress. The mind treats newness as danger because it disrupts the known rhythm of survival. But spiritually, that discomfort is necessary. It's the breaking of an old identity so you can hold a greater blessing. Growth always requires pressure. It forces expansion. That's why the closer you get to breakthrough, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Think about this in your own life. How many times have you been on the verge of something new, only to face unexpected setbacks? You're about to launch that project, and suddenly, fear shows up. You're finally ready to move forward, and people start questioning your decisions. You feel resistance not because you're unworthy of what's coming, but because the spiritual atmosphere recognizes that something powerful is about to emerge. The weight you feel isn't a sign of defeat. It's labor pain. You're not breaking down, you're breaking through. And that's where discernment becomes essential. You have to learn to distinguish between spiritual warfare and self-sabotage. The enemy uses discouragement, doubt, and delay to get you to quit before your blessing manifests. But often the real test isn't about fighting external forces. It's about mastering your internal ones. Can you stay focused when you're frustrated? Can you hold faith when everything in you wants to give up? Can you still believe in a God you cannot see when everything visible seems to contradict his promise? That's the battlefield of blessing. It's fought in the mind before it's won in life. Philosophically, this stage of struggle represents a divine paradox. The greatest spiritual victories often come disguised as personal battles. The pain you feel is not the end of your faith. It's the stretching of it. God doesn't test you to see if you'll fail. He tests you to show you how strong you've become. Every resistance you face builds endurance. Every delay deepens trust, and every disappointment refines vision. The blessing isn't only the outcome, it's the transformation that happens in the fight. From a psychological lens, adversity builds resilience. It's how we rewire ourselves to handle greater capacity. You don't grow stronger in comfort. You grow stronger in confrontation. That's why the pressure before breakthrough feels so intense. It's preparing you to sustain what's coming. Without resistance, blessings can crush you. With it, blessings refine you. There's also something deeply spiritual about how warfare reveals character. When life presses you, what's inside you surfaces. That's when you find out if your faith is rooted in feeling or conviction. God allows these seasons because He knows that the same storm that threatens to drown you can also train you to walk on water, if you keep your eyes on Him. The key is to shift from fear to focus. Fear magnifies the storm. Focus magnifies God. So when you're under attack, when nothing seems to go right, when prayers feel unanswered, when every door feels stuck, remind yourself that you're in the final stretch of the battle. The enemy only targets what threatens him. The fact that you're facing warfare means you carry something powerful. Your potential intimidates the darkness, but here's the truth: the blessing is already set in motion. The enemy can't stop it. He can only try to convince you to step away from it. That's why perseverance is spiritual warfare's greatest weapon. When you refuse to quit, you strip the enemy of his power. Every time you rise after being knocked down, you declare that your faith isn't circumstantial, it's foundational. That kind of endurance terrifies the enemy because he can't control a believer who won't give up. If you're feeling that pressure now, if life feels like it's closing in on you, remember this: pressure is proof of purpose. The greater the blessing, the greater the battle before it. Don't mistake the fight for failure. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. Hold your ground, keep praying, keep moving. The moment you feel like giving up is often the moment just before the door opens. Because when God is about to bless you, the enemy's last defense is distraction. Don't let him win. Stand firm, stay focused, and keep faith alive. The battle you're fighting today is the bridge to the blessing you've been waiting for.